Hello and welcome. You're listening to You Should Ask My Sister, a podcast about siblingship and friendship. We're your hosts, sisters Stephanie and Melissa Erdis, and Liz is going to tell you what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so this is kind of a different episode for us. We've been discussing it for the last couple weeks. We're going to title it The Day My Sister Was Diagnosed with Cancer. In 1991, January 11th, Steph was diagnosed with leukemia. We are recording today on January 11th. It's not a date that we talk about, but it's definitely a milestone in our timeline and a lot of people's timeline, especially the community that we grew up in. And for the listeners that didn't know us at that time, that have come into our life later in life, it's an important pivotal moment in our life that has helped create who we are today. It's also a story of hope. That was always what our mom would say. This is a story of hope and it needs to be told. Neither of us like to necessarily tell it. So just a little disclaimer, it's a little bit of a harder topic for us, but I'm excited to talk about it because we haven't. And as we were leading up to this episode, we were just casual conversation and we realized that we had two completely different journeys from the day of diagnosis through really months, but definitely that weekend, the next week. And we were comparing stories for the first time in 30 years. So it was interesting to us and we hope it's interesting for you.
Yeah, I've been a little nervous all day. It's very hard to talk about. And here we are exactly 30 years later, like gonna wade our way through this and just kind of sitting at the beginning of this, just so full of gratitude, thinking back on so everything that everyone did for us. I mean, it's mind blowing. And because we were children, so much of what people did we didn't know, like, and still to this day, like just so grateful to all of the family members and friends. And I've said before, like, Jamestown and Mercer County are the town that saved me. They saved our whole family during that time, so I'm excited to talk about some of that. So I may get a little emotional, so
I'm sure both
we're just
of us
gonna let
will.
it
It's yeah. And it's Monday, so like everyone cries on Monday. So I want to start with a story that I didn't know until a couple years ago because we were both kids and didn't necessarily understand what was happening. I saw like tests being done and conversation, but Steph told me a story about the night before January 11th when we made the trip to Pittsburgh. And Steph, do you want to start there and tell the listeners a little bit about that? Talk to, growing up and living in a small town, and then walk through as much as you are comfortable with the first couple days that weekend.
I think that is a great place to start because, we're going to talk a little bit about, how Jamestown itself like impacted the healing of me and our family and, supported us through the transplant and still support us today. But yeah, so I want to frame up a little bit too about like where we were in our lives. So it is middle of winter in Western Pennsylvania. So it is cold. All of the lights are down from Christmas. It's, the first kind of week and a half back at school. I am 11 and I'm halfway through sixth grade. So Melissa had just turned 9 the month before, and you were third grade.
Yes.
And so we are just like the most normal kids. Like, I got a chemistry set for Christmas that year because I was like in sixth grade. So I needed to like not get toys. So I was like, I'm going to get a chemistry set. We're right on the cusp of like things like hammer pants. Like that's really like where we are in the world. And I had a huge, we're going to talk about some cultural things going on in the early 90s that should be fun. I had a huge poster of MC Hammer actually in my hospital room. Someone got it for me. And, and still heart that I can't touch this and too legit to quit tapes, audio tapes.
The anthem.
Yeah, the anthem can't touch this. That is of Melissa's anthem. But that kind of is painting the picture for you. So my mom had discovered, like, she was just so smart all the time, but like, and I think she was like always worried we were going to get sick or something. So she had discovered some bruises on my legs, and we're not talking about like, oh, like bruises, like covered. Like I had bruises everywhere, and they were very strange looking. They were like little, they're called petechiae. They were like these little brown, weird bruises. And I probably had like 30 of them on my legs. And this is weird because in sixth grade, you don't really, like I'm already taking showers on my own and dressing myself and stuff. So it would be weird to see your kid's legs in January like in Pennsylvania. But she'd run into a sale. She had gotten some clothes. I was trying them on and she was like, "What is wrong with your legs?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm 11." And so she called the doctor, and the doctor immediately sent me the next day for blood work. So this is a Thursday. It was right on the cusp of Desert Storm, because I remember the guy that took my blood work wrapped my arm up like it was in a cast. Well, he knew what he was testing for. He was testing for low platelets, and that could be a huge issue. So he like puts me in this huge bandage and calls it a war wound. And I was like, come on, buddy. Even when I was 11, I was like, this guy's a cheeseball. And so I go home. I finish my homework. I get ready for the next day. There might be a snowstorm. Cool. I go to bed. So this is where the story gets really interesting. That was a long lead up. Thank you for indulging me. So we have a family doctor in town, and this doctor has just been through every family tragedy in Jamestown. Like he was just by the bedside. Dr. Vujan was a saint. There should be a statue of him in Jamestown for some of the things that he did, and definitely for our family. Like he was there when my grandfather got sick and had a heart attack, and he called my parents and said, "I need to come to your house." So he had gotten the blood work, he'd put a rush on it, and they knew it was probably cancer. It was probably leukemia. So Melissa and I are in bed. It's January. We probably went to bed at 7:30. It was dark. He comes to our house. He sits at our kitchen table and he tells my parents, "This is what I think is happening. This is really serious. And here are your options," and helped them walk through their options. Came to their house. What doctor has done that? No. And they made some decisions with him that night. He was like, "This is way beyond what, we can do for a child in this area." So we had the choice of Pittsburgh or Cleveland. And we headed to Pittsburgh Children's Hospital the next morning. So just so thankful for the kindness in him being able to just have the foresight that this was going to be really scary for them. Mm-hmm. And, they must have gotten Dad out of bed. He went to bed so early. I can't imagine him being up at like 9:30 at night, but they did. And so that was kind of how it all started.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't remember that, and my dad and I have always had the same bedtime, so I'm sure they had to wake him up and I was sound asleep. And when you told me that, and it was a year ago or 2 years ago, I just remember being overwhelmed and just very thankful of where we were, mm-hmm. where we grew up, who surrounded us. Like that doesn't happen anymore, and it's also more known now. When I was 9 years old, I had never heard the word cancer. Mm-hmm. I had never heard the word leukemia. Word. I still can't spell it. I had no idea what it was. And so I doubt our parents had much more exposure than that, especially for, adolescent. And so just really thankful for that.
When I remember so then the next morning we get up to go to school, and there is like tons of snow. Like we did have a huge snowstorm overnight. School is canceled. Yay. And so now Mom has to tell me I have cancer. And I like don't feel like I have any concept of what must have been going through her head. And in the process of it, she gets super mad at me. Like I was like, "Wait, what did I do?" So I'm like making my bed and she's helping me. And I'm like, something's up. Why is she helping me make my bed? Normally I have to con Melissa into helping me make my bed.
And we had the heaviest bed comforters of any kids in the world. It was a 2-person job, and we always had to do it by ourselves.
Yeah, my grandmother had made these like Afghan like bedspreads, and they were the original weighted blanket, is what I will tell you. and they were so
Mhm.
heavy. So we would have to help each other make our beds because they were so heavy. So mom's helping me make my bed, and I'm like, something's up. And she's like, well, you had that blood work yesterday, and we're gonna have to take you to Children's Hospital. Um, and I'm all like, I've got like a million questions, and she's getting irritated real fast. And she's like, well, it could be like some kind of anemia, but Steph, it could be cancer. And I like lose it, right? Because I'm like, I don't know anyone with cancer. All I know is it's bad and like people die. And I was like, am I going to die? And then she got real mad. She was like, absolutely not. You are not. And she was like, and to be honest, she actually didn't know that.
No, she
But
didn't.
she was mad. And like, I just remember being like, oh, well, at least I'm not going to die. So, like, whatever. Like, I was like, well, she said so clearly. And I'm like, I'm not bringing it up again because she was so upset. And like, there must have been like a lot of emotion for her. Like, now that I'm an adult, I kind of can relate
Mhm.
to that. But I remember her getting, of course, you're not going to die. It was like the dumbest thing that could have come out of my mouth. And I was like, felt like that was like a totally legit question, but apparently it's not. And I'm not bringing this up again. I was like, so I'm going to live. We're going to go to Pittsburgh, and that's how this is going to be. And I'm so thankful that she had that like attitude, like at the time, because I never forgot that like the whole way through. And, I have to really kind of pause and say here, like super fortunate. Like it was a pretty bad cancer. Like it was AML leukemia, not super common. Um, we just like luck at every turn, God at every turn. So I'm just always like every day grateful for that. But at that moment, she did not know that that's how it was going to play out, or she did. She probably did. She was
Yeah.
like, I prayed about this. You're not going to die. We're going to be fine. So it was
It
just a
was
very intense experience.
totally, and it speaks to her mindset too, because the people that were fortunate enough to know her, she's just sweet and kind and giving and selfless. She did not give us an inch of self-pity ever.
Mhm.
Like, not even a little bit did you feel sorry for yourself, and there wasn't another outcome, like, just the grit that she also had. I mean, it definitely played a factor in what happened over the next 6 months for sure, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
I think
tough.
so too. Yeah. Yeah. She was, I was like, well, I'm never broaching that topic again. So yeah, so we took off for Pittsburgh, and it was a Friday afternoon-ish, like late morning afternoon when I got to Pittsburgh. They did tests, they put me in a hospital room. I stayed in that hospital room for the next 4 months. Um, I was on chemotherapy by like Sunday night. Like they did not mess around. And like I think now that just seemed everything that happened because I was a child just seemed like that was supposed to happen. Like now people will be like, "Oh yeah, they think it's cancer." They go on chemotherapy like 3 weeks later, and I'm like, "Whoa. That was not my experience." Like I was in the hospital on chemo within, hours of kind of an official diagnosis. And so grateful to the great folks at Pittsburgh Children's Hospital and Cleveland Clinic for just the amazing care.
Yeah. And I don't remember, I was with you guys. I just was
I do
kind of
not
all
remember that. I feel
I know.
terrible. I do not
So
remember you being with us at all.
so Steph asked me when we talked about this, she was like, "Were you with us?" I was like, yeah, I was." It was prior to, I mean, it's the '90s, so these hospital beds, even the kids didn't have the mechanics they have now, and now they're all under the bed. Like, you can't get under a hospital bed, but you could then, and that was, like, my fort. Like, I was just always under the hospital bed because I didn't know what was happening. There were people in and out. They were important. They were trying to get to staff. I didn't wanna be tripped on. I don't necessarily like people in general. So I made like this safety for for me under the bed. So yes, I was there. You just probably
You're
didn't
just
see
under my bed. Like,
that.
I don't like, I was like, "Where was Liz?" Well, and I think too, the important part of this is from the time you came home in the winter of '81 until, like 9 years later, we had not been apart, like,
Mm-mm.
for more than, like, 20 hours. Like, we just we had not, and so I think that this was very one of the things that was very hard is then you had to go back to Jamestown, and I had to stay in the hospital. Like, I got a couple weekend passes, but for the most part, I was there for more than 4 months.
Yeah. And When I did have to leave on that Sunday, I totally lost it. Just like there was a lot of trauma that had happened. And speaking to just like the ecosystem of help, my Aunt Pat took me back home. And in the process of having to leave my parents, my sister, getting news that I didn't fully understand, I forgot my homework in my mom's car. And I lost my mind. That's the nicest way I can say it. And my poor Aunt Pat was like, "Ugh, I have this upset kid." So we call my mom, and my mom's like, "You don't do your homework anyway. Like, why are you so upset? I can never get you to do your homework." And I'm still like losing it. And at one point, she did say, and it's that like tough love, like crying at this point is not going to help anything. And she had a point, but it didn't help the situation. And then she was like, "Liz, if there is any time in your entire world that no one is going to care if you have your homework done, it's tomorrow." And I was like, okay, pull myself together and got ready for that week.
I think that story, the thing that's so, I don't know, heart-wrenching for me in that story is just it had to feel terrible. That had to just be the breaking point. And then thinking about mom having to call the school on Monday and be
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Hey, so Steph's not gonna be back," because I did not go back to elementary school. Like, after 6th grade, we went to high school. We didn't really have a middle school. I never went back. I was out for a year. And so, like, can you imagine
Mm,
we went to this amazing elementary school. It was like almost fairy tale like just the teachers were so smart, so caring, so great at teaching us how to do things like read and talk and write on outline, which we use all those skills to make this podcast. But like
true.
and so supportive, those elementary school teachers so supportive, and Mrs. Reams, the principal, for our whole life, like still now, like just these amazing people. And like thinking about them being upset you didn't have your homework done, like they were probably upset.
Yeah, they were. And I never thought about like, did she make that call? Like how that happened? Because in a small town, everyone knows everyone. And so it's not like she was calling like a stranger principal that she talked to once a year. She was calling someone that, she knew. I knew that first day of school was going to be like weird, and it was like everyone just kind of like everyone was like sad, but like trying to make me feel better and like asking some questions, but like they knew I didn't know the answer. It was just a weird week. And like, of course, my head's not there. I had to go home and like pack a bag because my dad works hours that were not conducive to a schedule of a 9-year old. And so I packed a bag and I made a schedule, and I was staying with friends and family for every day. I think we made like a 2-week schedule. And so I was kind of tossed around a little bit that week. And I remember it was like midweek. So it was probably Wednesday. I was in a class, and I'm sure I wasn't completely there. And Mrs. Reams came and got me. Did you know the story?
No.
Yeah. So
She's such a
Mrs.
saint.
Reams
She has
came
stature.
and got me. And like, I don't I didn't know why I was getting called to the principal's office directly from the principal. But she checked on me and she said, "How are you?" And she brought me back to her office and she gave me a hug and she was like, "Let's call your sister and check in." And I'll never forget that. It was just speaks so much to how everyone in that community was just there for us. And I was so young, like I didn't know, but for it to be 30 days and 3 days away, or 30 years and 3 days away, and still remember it, like it was meaningful. It's just the teachers in general, because like what kind of year that this kid is going to have, and like we got through it.
I can just see her being like, "I'm gonna go hug Melissa Erdis. I'm gonna go hug Melissa Erdis." And
I
then
think it's I think
yeah,
it's
she
important to
probably was like,
tell.
"I need to hug that child."
Yeah. And even as a kid I wasn't much of a hugger, but I was accepting that week. I was definitely accepting. And for
She
our
came to see
listeners,
me in the hospital. She came to see me in the hospital.
which is a 2-hour drive. And if someone is listening to this who doesn't know, we were about 2 hours away from the hospital that stuff was at. And that's why I wasn't able to get to the hospital. I was only able to go every weekend. Someone drove me, usually my aunt. And and all of these teachers that we're talking about are still part of our lives. We still see them when we're home. They still ask about us. They're still, kind
We're
figures in
Facebook
our life.
friends with some of them now.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very appreciative. That was one of the best parts of that week for me, for sure.
Um, yeah, I think that's the lesson too, is sometimes the smallest thing that just shows that you care. Like, you don't have to know what to say. People are like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, well, no one knows what to say. Like,
Mm-mm.
but just to be present with someone is just so powerful. So we
My
fell
de-
into this routine. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say my default. If you don't know what to say, and this is someone you care about, just tell them you love them.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's so much and enough at the same time.
I think it's okay to acknowledge too, like, this is hard. This is
Hmm.
hard and this is tough, and I'm here,
Hmm.
for the tough and the hard, and, you know, I'm here. I love you, and this is, this is where we're at right now.
Hmm.
Um, so so yeah, we kind of fell into this routine. So mom stayed with me in Pittsburgh, and dad came up almost every night except Thursdays. He would spend Thursday night with you. And
Yeah, he would
then
he would pick me up wherever I was and take me to our house, which so got to go there once a week and see my cat, who I just loved. And I'm not a cat person, but Miss Kitty was everything. And so I got to see my cat, and we got to call Steph. That was my Thursday treat.
um yeah, and then Aunt Pat and Jen, our cousin Jen and Aunt Pat came up almost every weekend. And I remember them coming and visiting. Jen was a senior in college at the time, so she was just getting ready to, it was her last semester. Um, and that was the routine for months and months and months.
And one question I did have that I've never known, because I didn't stay there, where did our parents sleep when they stayed with you?
Um, yeah, so they were never in the room together, like never both mom and dad, like besides that first weekend stayed in the room together. There was like a recliner that folded out flat, and that was in most of the rooms because it was a children's hospital. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's what
so
I thought.
so I think sometimes now too, like I didn't really start processing, I think, the experience of our parents until we're older than they were at the time. So they would have been in their like late 30s, like 37, 38. How uncomfortable that must have been. Like
I would,
in order to sleep, I have to have like a pillow with a silk pillowcase, a weighted blanket, socks on my feet, like silence. Like I have no my she probably didn't sleep for like 4 months.
she couldn't have. And complete same. Like I have all the exact same thing: the silk, the weight, the California king bed, the pillow topper, and just the empathy I have for the situation that I didn't understand as a kid is like, how do you sleep in a hospital recliner for 4 months?
And people always, I mean, I had the tower of like
Hmm.
IV stuff that I had was the size of like Chewbacca. It was enormous.
Hmm.
Like it was taller than a human. It had sometimes up to like four different
Yep.
units on it. Like I had all kinds of stuff being pumped into me. And it weighed almost as much as I did. Like it was on wheels, but like those rooms were small and that thing was always going off. Like it was,
Yeah,
and
it
there were
was.
times I was so sick I had to be in total darkness. So it was like 24-hour darkness and all these sounds going off. Like it must have been miserable. Like, good gosh. Like I can't
Yeah.
imagine that as an adult now, but our parents are tough, tough cookies.
Seriously. And to not to bring me on the subject, but to not be with your other child.
Mm.
And so, as Steph said, my aunt or whomever would drive me to Pittsburgh. I became like this land marker expert.
Mhm.
I could actually get people to the Pittsburgh hospital, and we didn't have maps. I couldn't even read a map. I don't know north and south. I'm not Lois and Clark. I knew like turn this way at a purple door, and then you want the lobby with the gold monkey. Like it was crazy. But I'd been there so much, and every weekend, then that Friday and Saturday, my mom would go with me to a Ronald McDonald House, and so we got 2 nights together at a Ronald McDonald House, and I can't even say enough for the access to that and how amazing they were. And I don't remember everything that's happened, but I do remember like how amazing they were to us and me especially, and just really thankful for that.
Yeah, there was one of the reasons they picked Pittsburgh too is we had a friend there that some of the weekends I remember you guys spending with
Mhm.
her as well. So um yeah, like just people came out of the woodwork. Do you remember how many cards we
Yeah,
got? Like greeting cards? Like even the nurses and doctors were like, "Where are you from? Like why do you have all these stuffed animals and all these cards, like, are these from different people?" And we are like, "Well, yeah, it's just, like, from our town, yo." Um, and I mean, it was hundreds, hundreds, like, people that were friends with mom and dad, our friends, classes, like, my class sent me all these cards, like, just it was amazing.
strangers, just
Oh, yeah.
people we didn't know, but if you're in the town, like, you're part of a family. And that brings me to a question I had too, and something that's been on my mind lately. So, a lot of people have either been through a hard time or have someone in their ecosystem, friend, family who is in a hard time. And I think the best part of humanity and community is everyone's willingness to help and just wanting to jump in and support and love. And it's overwhelming to even think of all of what we receive. But is there anything that stands out in your mind during this time or in other experiences that you had that really, provided support?
You know, when I think about I think about, like, all the cards, like, if anyone that's has spent any time in the hospital or had any kind of serious diagnosis, like, the thing that they don't talk about with things like cancer is how boring it is. Like, it's super, super boring to have an illness. Like, there's nothing to do except to worry about your illness, and I wasn't allowed to worry about my illness because my mom had already told me I was not allowed to do that. So I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna sit here and, like, stare at the TV." So, like, getting cards, like, when the mail came, that was super exciting, and then, taping the cards on the walls of my room, and so then I got to, like, see the cards all the time, or people sent flowers or stuffed animals. Someone sent peanuts. I don't know who did that, but they were delicious, and I one whole week of being sick, all I did was eat root beer floats and drink peanuts. Or no, I drank root beer floats and I ate peanuts. And the doctors came in and they were like, "Oh, she's pretty sick, right?" And they're like, "Is she eating?" My mom's like, "Mhm." And they were like, "What's she eating?" And my mom's like, "I don't wanna tell you." And the doctor's like, "No, you need to tell us." And she's like, "No, I'm embarrassed. I'm not telling you what she's eating." And I'm like, "I just been eating, like, some root beer floats and some of these peanuts. Do you want some peanuts?" Like, that was literally what kept me alive for an entire week. And I have no shame about it. Like,
No.
never in my life again will I be able to eat 3 root beer floats a day and still, have that be acceptable. So, yeah, like, people would send snacks, and it was just unbelievable. I do think like, we were trying to figure out before this podcast, Japco and the Lions Club, one of them got us a VCR because we did not have one, and one of us got us a Nintendo. And the people that went together to do that or organize that, that
Mhm,
was gold because when I came back from the hospital, I couldn't go anywhere. Like people are like, "Oh, quarantine sucks." And I was like, "Yeah, well, this is my second go around at it." So,
mhm.
being stuck at home and having things like video games to play, especially since we could both play them, or like movies we could both watch, like that was very, very thoughtful. Every gift I got was thoughtful. Like everything was amazing. Which I think anytime that you can do something that shows that you care about someone in a situation, they're gonna be grateful. It's gonna just help them feel seen, help them feel, like, a little bit understood. Like, you're never gonna understand exactly what someone's going through, but you can understand that it's hard
Yeah.
and that it shows something that would support that. So, um,
I think
can
it's
I
imp
tell a funny story about the Nintendo?
Yeah.
So, this was, like, the original Nintendo, friends. So, it came with Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. Well, Duck Hunt had a gun. It's a good thing dad doesn't know how to use the
Mhm,
YouTube. Um, well, my dad would stay with me on the weekends. Well, my dad gets up at, like, 4:30 in the morning, and so one morning he's watching a hunting show, and he was using the gun from the Duck Hunt Nintendo to try to shoot the deer on the TV of the hunting show that he was watching, and I'm like, "I think he's losing it. I
yeah.
really think." losing it. But he was like, "Yeah, I think I'm just gonna like get this Nintendo gun and try to shoot these deer for on
That
this TV."
that's where we are at that point. Like that kind of describes what we had to do for entertainment, which entertainment, one of my favorite things that we received. Do you remember the zip cord gliders?
Oh my gosh. Well, I remember you and the zip cord gliders is what I remember.
Well,
That was
yeah,
a good
because I was like running around the hospital with these. It was like a styrofoam, big paper, plastic airplane thing. They finally put me down in like a construction wing because like I was throwing it everywhere. It was so much fun. Another, this is such a, I mean, especially like strangers really care too. They can be really empathetic. I think you made a good point that you'll never completely understand what situation anyone is, and you shouldn't try to. It's just showing up and supporting. And our first day at Ronald McDonald House, I mean, I'm a 9-year-old with anxiety, anyways. Like, it's just a little like scary and angst, and like, what is this? And so they were checking us in and walking us to our room, and the woman was like, it was right after Christmas, so she was like, "Hey, we have some leftover presents that we had from Christmas for the people staying here. Would you want one?" And of course, I didn't answer. My mom was like, "Yeah, I bet she'd like one." And so they took us into this closet, and she was like, "This side has the girl toys and this side has the boy toys." And again, I just like looked at my mom and didn't say anything. And she was like, "Do you care if she picks from the boy toys?" And she was like, "Absolutely not. No, go ahead." And just still to this point, because like just the kid that I was, especially running around like throwing cord gliders and stuff, if I would have got like a baby doll, no offense to baby dolls, it just wasn't my thing, opposed to like something Nerf. It like she just understood that and didn't make me like say it. I ended up getting this like dope GI Joe figure set, this action figure set that I ended up playing with under Steph's bed for the entire 4 months. Yeah. It was just this like it was this simple act of kindness and also like zero judgment that I again, you just remember those things. It's very sincere.
Um, at one point, people had donated a lot of money, which was incredible to help fund. We had insurance at the time, but to help fund things like gas, getting back and forth, or help with medication, like copays that weren't covered. And at one point, so Jerry Thompson took care of all of that, and I was like, thank God, because like, what does mom have in her purse? 14 tubes of lipstick. Like, for her to have the bandwidth to do that and to keep track of like money, because it wasn't money that like it, some people would just like put cash in a card, and it was like, this needs to go into a fund. So she managed that fund for a long time, and I got the ledger at one point. Like, she kind of handed it all to me just to kind of keep. We put the money in a fund in Mercer County, so that children that also have to travel can access it, children that are sick. And so it's in a community fund now. But I went through some of those letters. People we didn't even know. People did poker runs and collected donations at like meetings that they were a part of. And like, just, it was just so incredible to read it. Oh, I'm getting a little teary. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry, and everyone. I'll tell a funny story because you said lipstick, so we'll segue past some.
Go right
Yeah,
to mom's
yeah,
purse.
yeah. So, true fact, my mom carried around 7 to 14 tubes of lipstick at one time. If you know either of us, neither of us wear lipsticks. I think we're traumatized because she would every single time she would be like, "Can you get my purse and get my lipstick?" And we pull out like 7, and she would like specifically describe the exact case of the color that she wanted at that point. Like, that's how much lipstick like ruled our life. So one time we're in the hospital, and she said, and it was early on, she was like, can you get my lipstick? And of course I'm like groaning, going through, and I pull out this obvious tape that is wrapped in Christmas paper. And I'm like, what is this cassette tape? Sounds like a cassette tape. I'm like shaking it, and I could see the look on her face. It was just like, oh crap. She was like, here's the deal. I got you vanilla ice for Christmas, but I heard from my friends that it's not good language in there, so I wasn't going to give it to you because I don't think you're old enough. But we're going through a rough time, so I am going to give it to you, but you can never sing the lyrics out loud. And I was so happy to like finally get it. Like this is 1991. So I got this Vanilla Ice cassette tape in my Sony Sport Walkman, and I was under the bed for it going na 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 na, because I wasn't allowed to ever sing the words. I know all of the words to the song, but I was never allowed to sing them out loud. It was just funny.
Um, yeah, I love that story. I love that story. I don't think I knew that at the time. I probably did. I probably heard you humming a little Ice Ice Baby under the bed.
Well, I also get like, and I still to this day, if anyone hasn't known me in my adult life, I get things caught in my head like super easy. And so it was the same time that Pepsi commercial was out with that piano player that he said,
Was it Ray Charles?
yeah, you got the right one, baby. And I would just like repeat that over and over and over. And finally my Aunt Pat was like, are there any other lines to that song? And I went, uh-huh. Because that was the next line. That was a funny 9-year-old.
Yeah, you were a funny 9-year-old. I'm sure. Yeah, I know for sure. Aunt Pat also remembers that Pepsi commercial. So does Jen. I'm sure both of them very much remember that Pepsi commercial. Just another thing to be thankful that they have a good sense of humor about 9-year-olds singing some commercial jingles.
Yeah, I don't even like to be with myself in the car for 2 hours. So I can't imagine back and forth my music. And I know like an oldie song will come on and I weirdly know every word to it. And I know it's because of all the time I was in the car, and like you have a kid in the car and it has to be clean music. So it's always nostalgic hearing some of those songs.
That's so interesting because I spent no time in a car. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't in a car at all. So it was like very unusual that I was like not in a car at all. Um, so yeah, so opposite. Yeah. So thinking about that, like other things that as an adult, let's do a little retrospective on 30 years, like how this diagnosis and that time have maybe changed or impacted us as adults. Like I said, I will say I didn't like talking about cancer at all. Like I really did not. And I really started talking about it when I got to be the age that my mom was when I was diagnosed, realizing like this isn't my story. And this isn't even just like our story, because I've never really considered it like my experience. I've always considered it our experience. But as I became, an adult, I was like, this is the story of our parents. This is a story of our entire family. This is a story of the town we grew up in and our parents' friends and our friends. And just it was much more than that. And mom always pushed the hope part of it, which I also don't think I understood until I got older. And then you knew people that died of cancer. Like at the time, it was just like, oh, cancer? Yeah, we do those things and it's fine. It's not. It's horrible. And it is devastating. And I have some survivor guilt sometimes from it. Like just, we were just so lucky to have this story of hope. And mom was like, we have to tell people about it because people need our hope. And I did not agree with that until I was much, much older. And I still don't tell the story with the grace that she did.
We're trying.
But yeah, we're trying. We're trying. She is going to be so mad. Like, she's going to be so mad about that Vanilla Ice story. She's going to be like, I can't believe you told people that of all the stories, Melissa May.
Oh, it'll be me making fun of her lipstick. It's not.
She's also probably like, why are you girls not wearing lipstick? Well, listen, it's because of the masks. That's why we're not wearing lipstick now. But
yeah, for sure. No, I agree. And hearing you be a part of Voices of Hope those summers when you did decide to talk about it a little more was incredibly inspirational, because it's not easy. And I've always, and I still to this day, respect people's privacy when it comes to health or really anything. Like people deserve their privacy. And so we just didn't talk about it. We talk a little bit more about the bone marrow transplant, which eventually we'll have a podcast about this, but we both found it important to talk about this day, being on the exact day of it, mainly because it's not just our story. And not everyone got to see like the whole story. So to go back to your question, yes, we went through this, and people that were around us went through this, and by the grace of God and modern medicine, and I don't even know, we got through it. And so how did it create like who we are today? I think there's good and bad. I have an immense phobia of medical and needle that I will always deal with and have no problem dealing with because everything turned out okay. But that's with me, and some anxiety I've had to work through for years of like, I think we have some just genetic anxiety, but going home and packing a bag and going to all these I was always nervous about like what bus I needed to get on and who was going to sign my slip and who's going to pick me up, and honestly there's no reason to be nervous about that because I was in the absolute best care possible, and I knew that. But I have some anxiety when my plans aren't set and people now who are no like won't understand like why I need like a schedule and set, and that I think that's why. I think the good thing about it is I I hope that I do a due diligence to give back when people I either know or don't know or are in a hard situation. I donate to Make a Wish and Ronald McDonald House and American Cancer, just 3 organizations that really helped us get through. So I think those are some lasting impacts. What do you think?
I am like an A number one hypochondriac. Oh yeah.
I
Like
no, I don't think you are. I'll let you speak your piece after I say this, but I don't think you are. I think you're very conscious of your body and you, which I appreciate being your person. Like you're very conscious of anything that could be alarming, and it's just the world that you have to live in.
I mean, I think other folks that also have like share with me in a cancer diagnosis, like I think it's always with you.
Mhm.
Like I think that's what's like I have been a cancer survivor longer than I've been almost anything else in my entire life or will be. And it's just, it's really interesting because I call people sometimes that have been diagnosed with cancer later in life because it's like this really pivotal point in their life for a lot of people. And so I call them like born again humans because it's like, they've, had this really terrible thing happen and they create this kind of purpose around it in their life, which I think is great. Like I think that that is fantastic. But I didn't really have that part of the cancer experience because I was 11. So like what was my life before? Like Girl Scout cookies, like, you know,
Sleepovers, like
sleepovers, playing games. Like it was, I didn't have a chance to like develop enough bad habits to change after I got cancer. I do think it probably kept me from some bad habits. I think I have a very like good relationship with my body. Like I listened to it very, very well because I had to, and I had to advocate for some of my own care. I know one time I had these like tubes in my body, like they went right into my arteries, and that's how I got the chemo, and that's how they drew my blood because otherwise it would have collapsed the veins in my little baby arms at the time. So someone came in to draw my blood, and they came in with, like they were like, "Hey, we're gonna draw your blood," and I was like, "They already did that." And I'm like an 11-year-old, half asleep. It's like 5:30 in the morning, and this woman's, I'm not cooperating with her because I'm like, "They already did it." And she was like, "You need to cooperate, and this will." And I was like, "You don't understand. You are wrong. I am right." And so I'm having to advocate. And so finally, mom was just like, "Could you maybe check with the nurses? This is unusual. We've not had this happen in the 3 months we've been here." And so the woman got mad, and she comes back and gets her stuff. And she's like, she was right. Her blood was already drawn. I was like, so I think I learned early on to very much advocate for my own health. Like I'm the captain of the team.
Mhm.
Like the doctors, the nurses, everyone else, I'm still the captain, and I'm still the one that is going to have to advocate. So I think that I've always been like that since I was little. I have lots of friends that are like, "Well, I really like this doctor, but I don't really like how they're treating me. And I was like, get a new doctor. I was like,
Mhm.
fire that one, get a new one. What do you mean? Why are you wasting your time with this? Or they'll have like an ailment that they've been struggling with for a long time. And I'm like, get to the doctor, like do those things. So I do think that that was a kind of a direct repercussion, but I often like have a headache and have to WebMD it for like 45 minutes because I have to like satisfy the hypochondriac in me. So I
Um,
appreciate you saying that because, it's not like unfounded. I think that you have to be a good advocate for your own health and a good being tuned into your body. What's your body telling you when it doesn't feel good?
yeah, and I know a few hypochondriacs. I will not call them out. You aren't. You're just very responsible. And if anyone picks up any message from this, the message that you just said is so important because hospitals, even now, it's the same. Like you have to ask the questions, you have to push for the information. A lot of people go through that. I know when our cousin Kelly was going through treatment, she had just come out of a surgery, and I was there and she was in pain. And I was like the first one at the nurse's station, like knocking on them, like, hey, I need something. And I don't like to talk to people or be in hospitals, but like just advocate. I mean, everyone works so hard in hospitals, but it's the communication and the just you said, captain of your team.
You're the
It's a good
captain of the
message.
team.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that that was it. I think personally, it's hard for me to think about like how cancer has changed us 30 years on because there's so little. I think that, I think that's obvious that it's, helped us bond as, sisters, but I think we would have been close anyway. Like I think it's hard
Hmm.
to I don't like to dwell on like things that don't have an answer. Like what would it have been like if you hadn't had cancer? There's no answer to that. I had cancer. I've had it for 30 years. Like it's part of my everyday life. So I don't dwell on a lot of those like what ifs. So that may also be a part of it. And I try to be an empathetic person, but I also try to be like really real. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, like people, and I try not to say like silly stuff. We talk about this with our friend Roberta, where people will say like really like cliched stuff because they don't know what to say. If you're one of those people that says cliche stuff, go ahead, say it because it's good. Like just you're expressing that you have concern, which I think is great. But I try to be really real, like instead of being like, oh, this everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that. So I'm like, this sucks. I'm
And
like, what
definitely
do you
not
mean?
it's definitely not someone in a dark time wants to hear either. Like we've recommended before, I love you, I'm here for you, best support words there are out there. I can also say we're both realists. Like we didn't have a lot of fairy tale as kids. It was a very real situation for us. And so we approach life as realists, not optimists, not pessimists, just I didn't even say that right, but whatever. We're both very real. And that's how we address situations. There's not a panic, there's a process. And
It's not
it,
time to worry. That was my
yeah,
mom's favorite expression. She would be like, "Girls, it is not time to worry." And I will tell you, it never became time to worry. I
I
would be
know.
like waiting for it. Like I would be like, "Well, clearly mom will tell me when it's time to worry. I'm just going to sit here and pretend I'm not worrying." Never came
And
time.
for that to be her like mantra for us, because she lost her father and we lost our grandfather in the midst of this.
Mhm.
The whole time was time to worry, but that was just not what we did. That was just not how we showed up. That's not how she showed up for us. I can't even understand the strength, but just that like you can have your moment. You can feel how you feel in your moment, but you still show up. You go to work, you figure it out.
Well, and with her, and I think this like rubbed off on both of us. We prayed a lot. Every time that we could walk to the chapel in the hospital, we would. We would walk there, and she would go there sometimes for like prayers or services. I wasn't always allowed to do that because I had like a low immune system. But we if it was a bad day, she would be like, "We're just gonna walk to the chapel and talk to God for a while." And I would be like, "Okay." We would take my enormous like ivy tower, and we would just go in there and we would sit and pray. And it's probably been redesigned since then, but I could tell you exactly where the chapel is in Children's Hospital has been changed. It's a new building now, but exactly in Cleveland Clinic, because every time we would go to the doctors, we would do the doctor's thing. After that, we would go to the chapel, we would pray, and then we would go have Pizza Hut. Every appointment that I went to in Cleveland, that's how it went down. So I think this like strong faith and this strong sense of prayer, and not prayer for things to go right, but prayer for the strength to, for what's going on, to like handle and be with what's going on was definitely a theme. And though I don't think things happen for a reason, I do think we can find purpose in things, and we have some control over how we incorporate what we're going through into our life. And so I think that's just, everything happens for a reason with intention. Like, I think there's more intention behind that, is how I feel. Like when something happens, you can design purpose in that in your own life. So
so we haven't really talked about this topic or this saying, but I feel the same way. I feel that things happen and how you react to it build your character, build you into who you are. And that's just kind of how we approached life. And it's so funny when you say chapel, because I hadn't thought about that in 30 years. But as soon as you said that, I can picture it too. We walk down there all the time, because to go to the food court or the gift shop, my two favorite places, every single time we went, we went to the chapel, and she made it very conversational. It was, let's just go talk to God. Let's prepare ourselves.
What a gift. What a gift she gave us in that. Yeah, I'm very thankful for that. We would have gotten that gift anyway, but we may not have had the chance to practice it like we did in this situation.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know we want to do some shout outs to some unsung heroes, and so many people to be thankful for. So to anyone listening that was part of our journey back then, just so much gratitude for you.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you can kind of wrap this up if you want, after I go through some notes that we put together for our listeners, our ecosystem. We're hoping the tone of this really talked to heroes. And I love myself Wonder Woman and our caped heroes, and they embody truth and justice. And we have heroes that are in scrubs and in uniforms and front line and military, and all of our heroes that signed up for a life of service, all the doctors, all the nurses, all the support staff, you're heroes, and we really appreciate it. But we had just so many unsung heroes that we can't possibly name all the names. But for me, like, an unsung hero is just someone that held our hand, someone that picked me up at the bus stop or got me to the bus stop or found me at a bus stop, someone who drove me back and forth to school or to Pittsburgh every single weekend to make sure that I got to see my family and they got to see Steph. All the people that helped, feed me and our family, made sure my clothes were clean. I have no idea who did my laundry for 4 months, but thanks. If you ever want to do it again, let me know. I always have a lot. My baseball uniforms, I know they were always dirty and always clean, and I really appreciate it. Everyone that helped with schoolwork, I have a special thank you for some spelling practice I had to do. I mentioned I'm not a good speller, and I had a lot of studying with my Uncle Roger. If anyone's ever had an uncle help them with their spelling test, it's a special practice, especially because we're from the same DNA and very impatient. So I really appreciate that. I remember sitting in the bunk beds, very frustrated. And my Aunt Sandy, I stay with them a lot. She was a librarian in our school and helped with my schooling. I stay with them on a consistent basis. Just so appreciative of anyone that took me in and went to visit Steph. All the cards, all the toys, all the just prayers and thoughts, all the educators that just wrapped their arms around us and made sure that we got through it, and we did it together. And this day is like for all of you guys.
I was doing so well, and then you started to lose it towards the end, so I just started losing it too.
I know, I did start to lose it.
Well, and not only did you stay with Aunt Sandy and Uncle Roger a lot, Aunt Sandy then taught me when I came back home because I couldn't go to school. So I remember people talking about their kids doing Zoom. And I was like, your kids will be fine on Zoom. I was like, I didn't have Zoom. I had Aunt Sandy, which was much, much better for my homeschooling. So yeah, to all of our aunts, Aunt Terry, Aunt Sandy, Aunt Pat, our cousin Jen, like I just remember them so prominently helping Uncle Roger, being there. Like, just there's so
Our
many people.
our friends, Patty, Robin. Robin took me on a bike ride when I wasn't able to go to school because I had to be in a mask. Yes, I was a 9-year-old that wore a mask willingly. Um, Carol, Jerry, like all of them, like everyone in Jamestown, we're just so thankful. And we've never really had an opportunity to tell you how thankful we are, but we definitely are.
Absolutely. Um,
Well, this was a Monday.
right? It was a Monday. Now I'm all like weepy.
No, I think it was
Not
good.
all of my Mondays are like this, but this isn't the only one. So yeah, so friends, thank you for sticking with us for these 30 years.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's to the next 30. We'll talk
yeah.
a little bit in a few months. It'll be a 30th anniversary of the bone marrow transplant. There's several stories, and that most of them funny. One of me being lost in the hospital right after the surgery. So it'll probably be a little bit more of a celebration. This was a little bit of a different tone for us, but I'm sure it's a story that not everyone has completely heard.
Well, and it's interesting. This story for us is so like this is a dark part of year, and this was a dark part of the journey, and then summer will come and we'll tell a lighter story. But um yeah, filled with gratitude tonight as we're wrapping up our podcast. And for those of you that are struggling with a diagnosis yourself, if you have lost someone as we have to cancer, we are with you as well. Like, with you, we love you, we're here for you.
Absolutely.
So, Liz, do you want to tell everyone where they can find us before we
Yeah.
sign off?
Yeah, so all of our podcasts are on our YouTube channel. You should ask my sister. Also post them through social handles. My open Instagram is Lissie LISSIE underscore Erdis ERDICE, and Steph's is woman underscore in the wild. You can send us questions. We've had a hard time telling topics beforehand, so we're not getting previous questions. And honestly, we ask each other questions constantly 24/7, so we've been able to fill content. But if you have any ideas for episodes, if you have any feedback from this one, we'd love to hear it. We love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, thank you all so much. You have been listening to You Should Ask My Sister with your hosts, Stephanie and Melissa Erdis. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.